Hi, everybody. This is Silvio Canto in Dallas, Texas on Sunday, October the 30th. And welcome commentary. Just a quick heads up. If you look in the inventory of our videos and podcast, you will see that we did an interview with George Rodriguez on Friday. It was an interview about Texas politics, and I think you'll find that interesting. It's sort of a sort of a summary, if you will, of Texas politics, the race for governor, the race down on the border, those three very interesting districts on the border, number 15, number 28, and number 34, where we could see something very historic this year, and that's the election of three Latina Republican ladies to the Congress. The three right now are very competitive, and you never know. We may see a little history there on Tuesday night on election night. So check out the podcast with our friend George Rodriguez. We've been doing podcasts with George for a while, and we have this one plus another more that we're going to do before the election. Then, of course, one after the election, looking back at what happened in Texas, where I think George and I believe that there's going to be a pretty good night for the Republican Party here in Texas. So check out the podcast or the video. It's in our inventory of videos there on the left-hand side. I got to say something about this attack on Mr. Pelosi. As you know, Paul Pelosi is the husband of Speaker Nancy Pelosi. Now, I should add that Mr. Pelosi is a very successful businessman in California. I don't know how wealthy he is, but let's just say he's doing very well. I think he's got several business interests in California. Let's just say he's a very successful businessman, and that's good. Power to him. He's obviously not an unknown person. And on, I think it was Saturday morning or Friday morning, somebody broke into his house around 2:30 saying, "Where's Nancy?" And, the details are a bit sketchy, but basically somebody broke into his home. Couple of things that I want to say about this. The guilty person here is the person who broke into his home. And those who are out there trying to find a political connection to this or somehow connecting this to some political movement are completely wrong. There's nothing political about this. This is just another crazy guy running around in San Francisco. And that's really the issue. The issue is that in a city like San Francisco and other cities like Portland and Seattle and Minneapolis, there's too many people like this running around the streets. And the local government tolerates this. Instead of picking up these people and putting them in jail if they're a threat to society, or putting them in some health clinic or something where they can overcome whatever addictions they have, they leave them out there in the street. And then they hurt people, they break into people's homes, they break into businesses. And it happens a lot. The only reason we're hearing about this one is because it happened to somebody named Pelosi. But talk to anybody who's familiar with San Francisco, Seattle, Portland, and they'll tell you this stuff happens just about every night. Crazy people like this are running around the city, hurting people, hurting business, and hurting the reputation of the city. It happens all the time. And the real problem here is not that this person posted something on social media before about this politician or that politician. The real problem here is that these people are out there in the streets and nobody seems to care about it until they do something bad, like breaking into somebody's home. The people who try to politicize this thing, they're blaming it on Trump, of course. That's all the only thing they know what to do. But you remember a couple of years ago when there were some members of the Republican members of the House were practicing baseball for the annual congressional baseball game, and somebody came in and started shooting in them. Thankfully, nobody was killed, and that's because of the great effort of a police officer who was out there who stopped this thing from getting worse. But Steve Scalise, who is a Republican congressman from Louisiana, he was in the hospital for several weeks, recovering from the wounds that he suffered that day. The man who was doing the shooting that day was a Bernie Sanders supporter. Do I blame that on Bernie Sanders or the people who voted for him? No, I don't. He's crazy. The man who shot is crazy, just like the guy in California who broke into the Pelosi home is crazy. And again, I go back to the authorities, to the local authorities. Why are these people in the streets in the first place? Why aren't they doing something to clean up these homeless parks and all of these people living out in streets and so on? Why aren't they doing something? They should be, because that's where this guy was hanging around. And that's what the problem is. The other question, and I had this question right from the beginning when I heard the news about what happened at the Pelosi house. The real question I had is, how can the home of the Speaker of the House be that unprotected? I mean, she was not there. I understand when it happened, she was not there. But nevertheless, it is the home of the Speaker of the House. You would think there'd be at least some protection. I'm not saying they have to have, the 82nd Airborne surrounding her house, but there should have been some protection. It's just hard for me to believe that there wasn't any, that somebody could just walk right into the house of the Speaker. I also wonder, this is the Pelosi household, as I say. Not only is she the Speaker, but he's a famous businessman or a successful businessman. It just amazes me that they didn't have the simple security system that most homes in the country have, where you have some kind of an alarm or something to stop people from breaking into your home. So, don't blame it on Trump. Don't blame it on Republicans. Don't blame it on anybody except the guy who did it and the cities that tolerate these people living there, walking around and running around and taking drugs in the middle of people, in the middle of the street, and injecting themselves right there openly for everyone to see. I mean, if you want to understand why people are moving out of San Francisco, they're moving out of LA, they're moving out of Seattle and Portland and Minneapolis and Chicago, and there's quite a few others, it's because the local government tolerates people like these hanging around the streets and being a threat to our society. So don't blame it on any politician. Blame it on the guy who did it. That's who did it. And there should be some circumstances. Somebody said something very interesting on this topic. He said, if this was anybody but Mr. Pelosi, in other words, if this had been another home in San Francisco, the guy who did it would be out in the streets in 48 hours. And that's true. He would have been out in the streets in 48 hours. It's because he attacked a famous person that he's in jail and is going to be prosecuted. And that's on the local government. The local government is at failure for problems like that. Well, let's talk a little bit about our weekly review here of the political situation in the country. We have one more weekend. We're talking about 10 days, 12 days before the election. So let's take a look at where we stand right now. And we're using as our measurement here is Real Clear Politics. This is a website that publishes averages of the different polling data, and they include some projections as well. As of today, October the 30th, meaning 10 days, 11 days before the election, RCP, the average of the RCP, is projecting a Republican pickup in the House of about 25 seats. So that would mean the Republicans would have about 230 to 235 seats in the House. Some are projecting more, maybe 240 to somewhere between 230 and 240 is where the Republicans are projected at this point. That's a pretty good, that's a majority to run the House. Over in the Senate, and that's been the more controversial one, the more difficult one, because, obviously in the House, we're talking about districts. In the Senate, we're talking about the entire state. But over there right now, the RCP average is projecting that the Republicans will pick up 3 seats. Everything starts with Pennsylvania, and that's the key one, because Pennsylvania right now has an incumbent Republican senator. So the Democrats were hoping to pick up a seat in Pennsylvania. They were hoping to pick up Pennsylvania because that puts them in a position where they can at least, they have to force to win another one just to bring it back to 50-50. Remember, we're 50-50. So if the Republicans can hold Pennsylvania, then any other pickup puts them in the majority. Well, according to the RCP, not only are they going to hold on to Pennsylvania, meaning 50-50, but they're going to pick up Georgia, they're going to pick up Nevada, and they're going to pick up Arizona. I tell you, that would be a great night for the Republicans. Now, there are some who believe it's going to go beyond that because there's some talk about New Hampshire, there's talk about Colorado, and there's talk about Washington. I think those, particularly Colorado and Washington, those are, I think, a little. That's a bit of a stretch, if you will, to pick up those two states, because that's just going to take. If that happens, then that's going to take a tsunami, not a wave, but a tsunami. But it could happen. It could happen. You could, if there's a tsunami, then New Hampshire goes, Colorado goes, and Washington goes, and who knows what else may go. But to be safe, RCP is picking right now three: Georgia, Nevada, and Arizona. And picking up those three means that the Republicans will control the Senate 53-47. Control the Senate is very important because that's where the judges are selected and approved. And if you can control the way judges are approved, and also not only judges, but the people who go on some of these bureaucratic positions have to go through the Senate. That puts a lot of pressure on the Biden administration to nominate people a little bit more centrist than the ones that they've been nominating here lately. So that's where we are, 10 days before the election. According to RCP, the Republicans are going to pick up about 25 seats in the House and end up 53-47 in the Senate. That would be a great night if that were to come true. Last but not least, let me leave you with a little bit of history. On this day in 1938, so that would make it, 84 years ago? A fellow named Orson Wells had a radio show on Sunday night. And he went on the air out of New York, and a little panic happened because people thought the show was real. The show was called The War of the Worlds. And the show was about aliens, landing in New Jersey and running around. And the thing was so good. The show was so good that there were people all over the country thinking that there were, in fact, aliens landing in New Jersey. One of the great geniuses of the show business, Orson Wells. I mean, it was incredible. If you listen to the show, and I have, you can get yourself a copy of that show. It's available in many different places. And you put yourself in the mind of somebody sitting in, let's say, Kansas or Missouri or wherever in 1938 on a Sunday night. It's dark outside, and this comes on the radio. Believe me, I understand now. If you listen to that show and put yourself in the minds of those people in 1938, you can understand why they thought that aliens were actually landing in New Jersey. Just a genius of a man, Orson Wells, and that show that he had on this day in 1938. Thank you for listening. Check out our conversation with George Rodriguez. This is Silvio Canto in Dallas, and we'll see you later. Have a wonderful day, everybody. And happy Halloween. I forgot to say that. Happy Halloween for everybody.